I never imagined it'd end up in a moment like this. The house was unnervingly still, the kind of quiet that buzzes in your ears. I sat at the dining room table, my finger hesitating above the glowing confirm button on my phone. The soft scent of chamomile tea drifted from the mug in front of me, a warm contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. My name is Rhea Navarro, and I was about to make a choice that would shift the course of my life forever. For weeks, I'd felt a creeping unease wrapping itself around our home. At first, I dismissed it as work stress or a rough patch in our marriage. But as the days passed, the feeling grew heavier, undeniable. The breaking point came with the announcement of a luxury cruise, something my husband, Ethan Blake, had arranged with his overbearing mother, Vivian. Not for the three of us, of course. I wasn't invited. I never was. These little getaways were just one more reminder that I was a bystander in my own marriage, tolerated but excluded, like some outsider who didn't belong. The bitterness that settled in my chest that day was one no amount of honeyed tea could ease. My hand trembled as I finally tapped the screen, cancel reservation. The phone blinked, confirming the action. Relief and dread surged through me in equal measure. There was no turning back now. The hours that followed blurred into a daze. I drifted through our spacious Willow Ridge home like a ghost watering the potted succulents by the kitchen window, a housewarming gift from my best friend Harper, straightening the picture frames above the fireplace. One photo caught my eye, Ethan and me on our wedding day, beaming, glowing with a love I'd thought would last forever. Where had that version of us gone? The jingle of keys at the front door shattered my thoughts like glass. Ethan was home. Even before he spoke, I could feel the tension rolling off him like a storm front. His shoulders were squared, his jaw tight beneath his tailored suit. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice sharp and low-laced with something far colder than anger. His eyes, normally a soft hazel, now flared with fury. I inhaled deeply, steeling myself. "I'm done pretending this is okay," I said. "You're leaving me behind again to run off with her like I don't even exist." His face twisted, fists clenching at his sides, and then, without warning, he struck. The crack of his palm against my cheek rang through the air like a thunderclap. I stumbled to the floor, stunned, pain flaring white-hot in my face. Blood filled my mouth as the room spun. "You ruined everything," he spat. As the blackness crept in, one final thought looped in my fading mind. What have I gotten myself into? I came to lying on the cold tile of our kitchen. My face throbbed, my cheek ballooned with swelling. For a brief moment, I thought the worst had passed. But as my surroundings came back into focus, I realized it was only just beginning. The silence pressed down like a weight. Ethan was gone. I tried to reach for my phone, but it had vanished. My purse and keys, too. I staggered to the front door, only to find the security lock engaged. Ethan controlled it remotely through his phone. I was trapped. Panic surged as I searched the house, hoping for a clue, any sign of what he was planning. In the kitchen, I spotted a note pinned to the fridge. The handwriting was unmistakably his. "I'm handling this." What did that mean? Was he still furious? Had he gone to Vivian's to cool off? Or was something darker unfolding? I stumbled toward the bedroom. My steps slowed as I saw the closet at my side torn apart, whole sections of my wardrobe missing. On the nightstand, I saw an envelope with just my name scrawled across it. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. At first glance, nothing alarming, just a picture from our wedding day. But someone had taken a thick black marker and scratched a message across it. "You don't belong here." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the photo clutched tight in my shaking hands. The woman in that picture, so full of love and hope, felt like a stranger now. How had everything gone so terribly, heartbreakingly wrong? How had it all unraveled so badly? As I sat curled up on Harper's couch, wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt and a fog of disbelief, my mind drifted back to the beginning, to the day I met Ethan Blake. It had been 5 years ago at a sunny weekend farmer's market just outside Willow Ridge. He'd dropped a bag of oranges, and he'd helped me pick them up, flashing the kind of charming smile that disarms even the most guarded heart. He was warm, attentive, magnetic in a way that made the world tilt just a little. We talked for hours that day, lost in conversation over coffee and stalls filled with fresh lavender and homemade jams. It didn't take long for me to fall. Our romance was fast, dizzying one of those whirlwind love stories that people write songs about. Within 6 months, we were married beneath the rustling eucalyptus trees at a coastal chapel. But the cracks began to show almost immediately. His mother, Vivian, had been an ever-present figure from day one. I knew they were close, but I hadn't realized just how much sway she held over him until we were living under the same roof. Every decision, no matter how minor, from which vacation, home to visit, to what color towels we kept in the guest bathroom, needed her approval. At first, I told myself it was just a strong family bond, but over time, it became suffocating. Vivian didn't just offer advice, she controlled every move. And Ethan let her. I became a spectator in my own marriage. I remembered all the family dinners I was too busy to be invited to, the whispered conversations that fell silent when I entered the room, the photos from their ski trips or beach getaways that never included me. And now, this cruise, this final insult, was the culmination of years of subtle exclusion. How had I let it go on for so long? Now, everything had changed. After the violence, after the note, after the horrifying message scrawled across our wedding photo, I knew I couldn't stay. I was trapped, isolated, and in danger. But if I was going to survive, I had to get out. With the house still empty, I began searching for a way to escape. Window by window, I checked for any weakness in our fortress of false security. In the guest bedroom, I found my miracle, a narrow window that opened just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as I moved with purpose. I grabbed a few changes of clothes, my passport, a handful of emergency cash I'd stashed months earlier, and stuffed them into a backpack. As I zipped it up, my eyes landed on a photo frame on the dresser, a snapshot of Ethan and me from our honeymoon, both of us tanned and laughing, arms entwined. I hesitated, and then I took it. Not as a keepsake of love, but as a reminder of why I had to leave, of how far we had fallen. Climbing out the window was clumsy and painful. I scraped my arms and tore my shirt, but the sting was nothing compared to the fear of what would happen if I stayed. When my feet hit the cool ground outside, I felt the first flicker of freedom. Then came the panic. Where do I go? Who do I trust? Only one name came to mind: Harper Lane. Harper had been my roommate in college, my soul sister, the person who saw through my carefully curated smiles. She had warned me more than once that something about Ethan's family didn't sit right. I dismissed her concerns, blinded by hope, by love. Now I realized she'd seen the truth long before I could admit it to myself. I moved quickly, slipping through side streets and dim alleys. The usual hum of Willow Ridge was gone. It was late, and the silence was eerie, like the whole city had taken a breath and was waiting to exhale. My mind raced. What was Ethan involved in? Why had he snapped like that over a canceled cruise? And what did that cryptic note mean handling this? By the time I reached Harper's apartment building, I was barely holding it together. I buzzed her door, praying she was still awake. Her voice crackled through the intercom. "Hello? It's me," I whispered, my voice already trembling. "Harper, please, I need help." Seconds later, I was wrapped in her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She pulled me inside, holding me tight as if her embrace alone could shield me from what I'd run from. When she pulled back and saw the bruise blooming across my cheek, her face turned pale. "Rhea, what happened? Who did this to you?" I couldn't even speak at first, but as the words poured out, the slap, the message, the locked doors, the missing phone, Harper's face shifted from horror to fury. "You are not going back there," she said fiercely. "Whatever's happening, it's not safe. You hear me? You're not alone in this." I nodded, the full weight of my reality settling like concrete in my chest. I was running from my husband, the man I'd built a life with, the man I'd once believed was my safe place. That night, Harper gave me a place to sleep, warm clothes, and the thing I needed most, belief. We talked for hours trying to piece together the truth of my marriage, bit by bit, and the more we talked, the more horrifying things became. "Rhea," Harper said, her voice low, serious, "what if this isn't just about a trip? What if they're hiding something bigger?" Her words echoed inside me. Ethan had always been cagey about his work, always vague when large amounts of money disappeared from our accounts, always quick to shut down any conversation about his family business. Something was buried in their secrets, and now I had to uncover it. There were secrets buried deep within the Blake family, and I was done running from them. As the first light of dawn bled across the sky in soft pinks and golds, I made a promise to myself. I would find the truth. No more hiding, no more pretending this wasn't real. Whatever Ethan and Vivian were involved in, I needed to uncover it. I had to reclaim my life piece by piece, even if it meant risking everything. The next few days at Harper's apartment passed in a blur of exhaustion and anxiety. I rotated between restless pacing and fitful sleep on her couch, my nerves frayed and fragile. Harper, ever patient, did everything she could, brought me tea, kept me talking, tried to make the place feel safe. But the weight of what I had discovered, and what I still didn't know, pressed down on me like a storm cloud that wouldn't lift. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. "I have to go back," I told her quietly as we sat at her small kitchen table, untouched bowls of oatmeal in front of us. Harper looked up sharply, her brow furrowed in worry. "Back? To the house? Rhea, that's insane." "I'm not going to stay there," I clarified. "I just need answers, proof. If something dangerous is happening, and I think it is, I can't just sit here waiting to be hunted. I need to understand what I was really a part of." She was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded, her voice low and steady. "Okay, but we're going to plan this carefully." And we did. We decided I would go during the day when Ethan was usually at work. Harper would drive me, wait outside, and keep her phone ready to call the police if I wasn't out within an hour. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best shot we had. When we pulled up to my street, my heart thundered so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. From the outside, the house looked as pristine as ever-perfect lawn, tidy flower beds, white shutters. But I knew better now. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. "Be careful," Harper said, gripping my hand before I opened the door. I gave her a shaky smile. "I'll be back before you know it." The key still worked. That alone sent a shiver down my spine. It turned with a soft click, and I pushed the door open, half expecting Ethan to be standing there waiting. But the house was silent. I moved quickly, my senses on high alert. I checked drawers, folders, mail bins, anything that might hint at what was really going on. In our bedroom, I found my old phone buried in a drawer. Dead battery, but I pocketed it anyway. Then I turned toward the room I'd never dared to enter alone, Ethan's office. He'd always made it clear it was off limits. Work stuff, he'd said, confidential. I hadn't questioned it then. Now I saw that as the warning sign it had always been. The room was immaculate, not a speck of dust on the polished desk, every book and file perfectly aligned. I started with the desk drawers, rifling through invoices, documents, receipts. Most of it seemed harmless, routine, boring. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of tax forms, I found a black folder marked legal, confidential. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents I barely understood, property deeds in Ethan's name, contracts with clauses that explicitly excluded a spouse from inheritance, and bank records. Dozens of statements from an offshore account I'd never known existed. Large sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, moving in and out in cryptic transactions. My breath caught in my throat. Was Ethan laundering money? Committing fraud? Was I unknowingly part of it? And then came the photos. Tucked in the back of the folder was a manila envelope. I opened it and gasped. Photos of me. Dozens of them. Me walking out of the grocery store, sitting at the park reading, heading to work. All recent. All taken without my knowledge. Each was labeled in black ink with dates, times, and one horrifying word scrawled across several of them. Eliminate. Or worse, destroy. The room spun. My fingers went numb. This wasn't just about secrets or betrayal anymore. This was premeditated. I was a target. But why? I didn't have time to answer that. The familiar jingle of keys at the front door snapped me back into reality. My heart lurched. He was home. Panic overtook me as I scrambled to put the folder back, shoving papers into drawers, slamming them shut, wiping my fingerprints in a frenzy. I had just closed the last drawer when I heard footsteps in the hallway, each one heavier than the last. There was no time to hide. I stood frozen behind the desk, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs as the doorknob turned slowly, then clicked open. As the office door swung open, I froze. My heart felt like it stopped mid-beat. Ethan's eyes widened in shock for a split second, then narrowed, dark and dangerous. He shut the door behind him slowly, the quiet click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the loaded silence. "Rhea," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "What are you doing here?" I forced myself to stand tall behind his desk, though my legs trembled beneath me. "You came to get some of my things," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't think you'd be home." He stepped closer. "And while you were at it, you thought you'd do a little snooping?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my panic from showing. "Ethan, what is all of this?" I asked, gesturing to the now closed drawer. "The documents, the photos. Why are you having someone follow me?" The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by something colder, sharper. The mask was off. "You should have stayed in your place," he said quietly, menace lining every word. "You don't understand what you've just stepped into." "Then explain it," I said, louder than I intended. "No more lies, Ethan. I deserve the truth." He stared at me for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then, to my shock, he laughed. It wasn't amused. It was bitter and hollow. "You really want the truth?" he asked. "Fine." He began pacing slowly, like a caged animal. "The real estate company? That's just a front. It's the polished exterior we show the world. But the money, the real money comes from somewhere else." My stomach twisted. "You're laundering money," I said quietly, the words falling from my lips like lead. Ethan stopped and looked at me, smiled. "Smart girl." "Yes, lots of it. And guess what, sweetheart? You've been a part of it this whole time, whether you knew it or not." I took a step back as the weight of his confession settled over me like a stone. Everything clicked into place. The strange financial transfers, the secret meetings with Vivian, the way they'd always kept me just far enough away from the family business. I was never part of it, only a useful cover. "You married me for this?" My voice cracked. He gave a small shrug, as if what he was saying should come as no surprise. "We needed someone clean, someone whose name wouldn't raise eyebrows. You were perfect. New name, new accounts. No one would question a loving wife helping out her husband's business." I felt sick. Nausea crawled up my throat. "Our entire marriage," I whispered. "It was a lie." Ethan didn't even flinch. "It was business, Rhea. Don't take it personally." But I did take it personally. Every anniversary, every lie. Every time he touched me and said he loved me, it was all calculated. A performance. "And the cruise," I said suddenly, remembering the trip that had set this whole nightmare in motion. "It wasn't a vacation, was it?" He shook his head. "It was a cover for a meeting. We're expanding the operation. Your little tantrum with canceling it? That almost cost us everything." The venom in his voice made me flinch, but I stood my ground. My next question came out quieter, almost unwilling. What were you planning to do with me? Ethan hesitated. That hesitation terrified me more than anything. That wasn't my idea, he said after a pause. It was Vivian's. She thought you were becoming a problem. She wanted contingency plans. Contingency plans. Cold, calculated language to describe whatever fate they were lining up for me. The surveillance photos, the word destroy, written across my image. My body went cold. They weren't just going to hurt me. They were planning to erase me. I forced the words out. So what happens now? Ethan ran a hand through his hair and sighed, looking almost exhausted. I don't know. You weren't supposed to find out. Now it's complicated. I want out, I said, louder this time. I don't want anything to do with this. Let me go. I won't say anything to anyone. He laughed again, but this time there was real amusement in it. You think it's that simple? He said, stepping closer. You can't just walk away, Rhea. You know too much now. You're in this whether you like it or not. As he spoke, I noticed his hand sliding toward his jacket pocket. Was it his phone? A weapon? I didn't wait to find out. Instinct took over. I lunged forward, slamming my shoulder into his chest with everything I had. He stumbled backward, caught off guard. I didn't look back. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, Ethan's voice rising behind me in a furious shout. My legs burned, but fear propelled me faster. I burst through the front door, gulping in air like I'd been drowning. Where was Harper? My eyes darted to the street, and there, like a miracle, her car came around the corner. I waved frantically, tears burning down my face. She pulled up to the curb just as I reached the passenger side and flung the door open. Drive! I screamed, diving in. Harper didn't hesitate. The tires screeched as she floored it, the house shrinking behind us in the rearview mirror. And standing in the doorway, watching us disappear, was Ethan. Even from a distance, I could feel his glare piercing through the glass. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I practically dove into Harper's car, slamming the door shut behind me. Go, I shouted, and she didn't hesitate. The tires screeched as she peeled away from the curb, leaving the house and Ethan shrinking in the rearview mirror. I looked back one last time and saw him standing in the doorway, his figure silhouetted in the frame like a shadow I couldn't shake. Even from that distance, I could feel the heat of his gaze searing through the glass. This wasn't over, not even close. As Harper drove, I poured out everything I'd just discovered. The offshore accounts, the contracts that erased my legal rights, the photos of me taken in secret. Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as I spoke, and by the time I finished, her face had gone pale. "Oh, Rhea," she whispered, "what are we going to do?" I stared out the window, familiar streets of Willow Ridge flashing past. Once, this had been home. Now, every building looked like a trap waiting to snap shut. I don't know, I admitted, exhaling shakily, but I can't go back. Not ever. The next few days passed in a haze of fear, planning and questions with no answers. Harper insisted I stay with her. "You're not going through this alone," she said with the kind of conviction that anchored me. We spent hours in her kitchen, surrounded by empty mugs and discarded takeout boxes, talking through every scenario. Should we go to the police? But without hard evidence, it would be my word against Ethan's end. I had no doubt the Blake family's influence reached farther than I could imagine. Could we just leave town? But where would we go? And how long could we keep running? On the third night, as we sat under the dim kitchen light, Harper gently placed her hand on mine. "Have you told your family?" she asked, voice quiet but steady. "Do they know what's happening?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. My parents and younger sister were still in Brazil, where I'd grown up. When I moved to the U.S. for college, they were supportive but heartbroken. They never fully warmed to Ethan, but they respected my choices. We used to talk every week, but since this nightmare began, I'd been avoiding their calls, and the guilt gnawed at me. "I can't," I whispered. "It's too dangerous, and I'm ashamed. How do I even explain this to them? That the life I built here was all a lie? Harper squeezed my hand. They love you, Rhea. They deserve to know. And you need their support now more than ever. She was right, even if every cell in my body resisted making that call. The next morning, while Harper was getting ready for work, I borrowed her phone. I still didn't trust mine and dialed the number I knew by heart. Al? My mother answered on the second ring. Me, I croaked, my voice trembling. It's me. There was a pause. Then her voice flooded the line in rapid Portuguese, thick with worry. Rhea, minha filha, where have you been? We've been so scared. Ethan called, said you'd had a fight and left. My blood turned cold. He'd already contacted them. Me, listen, I interrupted, trying to steady my breath. I don't have a lot of time. But you need to know the truth. Ethan is not who we thought he was. For the next 30 minutes, I gave her a condensed version of everything. The danger, the lies, the criminal activity. I could hear her gasp, hear the soft prayers she whispered under her breath. When I finally stopped talking, there was silence. Then her voice came, low and trembling. Oh, minha querida, what can we do? Should we come to you? No, I said quickly. Please. It's not safe. I just needed you to know the truth. We stayed on the phone a little longer. She offered what comfort she could, along with the practical advice only a mother could give. When we finally hung up, I felt drained, but lighter. At least now I wasn't carrying the secret alone. In the days that followed, Harper and I fell into an uneasy routine. She went to work during the day, while I dug into Ethan's past, searching for anything that might help us understand what we were truly up against. I scoured public records, real estate filings, and old social media posts. It was like trying to put together a 10,000-piece puzzle with half the pieces missing. Then, one afternoon, something caught my eye. An old news article from a Willow Ridge Society column, a glowing piece about a charity gala hosted by Vivian Blake. The photo featured her smiling stiffly next to a tall man with sharp eyes and a polished suit. The caption read, Vivian Blake with business partner, Calvin Rourke. Rourke. The name struck me like a thunderclap. Where had I seen that before? And then I remembered. Rourke had been listed on one of the shadowy contracts in Ethan's office, the ones with the spousal exclusion clauses and offshore signatures. My pulse quickened. I started digging deeper. Over the years, Calvin Rourke's name had appeared time and time again, always in connection with the Blakes. Charity events, property deals, international holdings, always just below the radar. Now that I knew what to look for, I saw it clearly. These weren't coincidences. These were connections, patterns, proof. And the more I found, the more I realized. The Blake family wasn't just laundering money. They were part of something much, much bigger. What once looked like a series of harmless social appearances, charity galas, business luncheons, and real estate ribbon cuttings, now clicked together like pieces of a sinister puzzle. Calvin Rourke's name kept surfacing alongside Vivian Blake's, not just socially, but quietly in the shadows of contracts and off-the-record meetings. These weren't random photo ops. They were carefully coordinated encounters, veiled meetings to plot the inner workings of something much darker. I was so absorbed in the trail of names and transactions, I almost didn't hear the key turn in the front door. Harper's voice rang out, tense. Rhea, are you here? I stepped out of the spare room, my pulse quickening when I saw her face. She looked pale, unsettled. What's wrong? I asked. She hesitated, then said, I think someone's been following me. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? I noticed it yesterday, a black SUV. It stayed a few cars behind me, but I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Today it was there again. I took back roads, made turns I never make. It stayed with me the whole way. We both froze. The implications were immediate and terrifying. Could Ethan have found us? For the next hour, we went through every room, checking windows and doors, drawing the curtains tight. Harper wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What if they're compromised? I whispered. Ethan has connections and money. What if someone in the department is working with them? Harper didn't argue. She didn't have to. We both knew how powerful the Blake family was and how far they go to protect their secrets. That night, neither of us slept. Harper dozed on the couch, her body curled protectively under a blanket, while I sat upright, staring into the dark, trying to calm the storm in my head. I thought about my old life, the girl I used to be before all this, the dreamer who came to the U.S. for a new beginning. Before Ethan, before lies, before surveillance photos and offshore accounts. Back then, my biggest worry was passing final exams and figuring out how to stretch a grocery budget. Now, every shadow outside the window felt like a threat. Every sound made me flinch. And then, sometime before dawn, an idea came to me. We needed evidence reel, irrefutable proof of what the Blakes were doing, something that couldn't be silenced or explained away. The next morning, I shared the plan with Harper. We can't just guess anymore. We need something solid. Documents, audio, video, anything. Harper looked at me, her brows knitting in concern. And how exactly do we get that? It's not like we can waltz into Blake Enterprises and start digging. I might know someone, I said. Someone on the inside. Her eyes widened. Who? Clara Voss, Vivian's personal assistant. She's been with the family for years. She was always kind to me, even when Vivian wasn't. I've seen the look in her eyes. She knows something's wrong. She just doesn't know what to do. Harper didn't answer right away. I could tell she was turning over every possibility in her mind. It's risky, she finally said. If she's loyal to them, it could blow up in our faces. I know, I said quietly. But if I don't at least try, we're sitting ducks. With trembling fingers, I dialed Clara's number. I hadn't spoken to her in months. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. My heart sank then on the 4th ring, she picked up. Hello? Came her soft, familiar voice. Clara, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's Rhea. Please don't hang up. I need your help. Silence. Then, so faint I almost missed it, I've been waiting for your call. The relief hit me like a wave. Over the next hour, Clara confirmed what I had feared and more. The corruption ran deeper than I could have imagined. The Blake family's reach extended into local politics, law enforcement, and even some federal branches. They're planning something big, Clara whispered. I don't know all the details, but it's soon. That cruise you canceled? It wasn't just about a meeting. They were going to move a massive amount of money overseas. It's the final step in something they've been building for years. I felt the blood drain from my face. Clara, I said, we need proof. Anything you can get, emails, recordings, even internal memos. There was a long pause on the other end. I might be able to get you something, she said at last. But Rhea, this is dangerous. If they find out I'm helping you— I know, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. And I wouldn't ask if there were another way. But this might be our only chance to stop them. We arranged to meet in 2 days at a small cafe across town. As I ended the call, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Progress always came with a cost. Harper, who had been silently listening from the doorway, looked at me with a mix of awe and worry. You're incredibly brave, she said. I shook my head. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. But you're doing it anyway, she whispered. That night, we sat quietly on the couch. I sipped tea, she scrolled the news, but both of us were lost in thought. I found myself thinking of Brazilov's slow Sunday afternoons at my grandmother's house, the smell of feijoada wafting through the air, my little sister giggling as we ran barefoot through the dirt roads. How had I ended up here, running from my own husband, hunted by the people I once trusted? But there was no time for longing. The next 48 hours would decide everything, and I had to be ready. I thought about my family constantly in those moments of stillness, the warm afternoons in my childhood neighborhood, chasing my little sister between tiled courtyards and fruit stands, my father's steady hands guiding mine as he taught me how to change a tire beneath the dusty sun. I missed them with a longing so deep it felt physical. But I also knew that staying away fighting this battle alone was the only way to protect them. Still, I allowed myself a sliver of hope. If we succeeded in taking down Ethan and the entire Blake family, maybe, just maybe, I could go home again. Not for a visit, but for good, to rebuild my life in the place where it once felt truly safe. But first, we had to survive the next 2 days. And in the world I now found myself in, that was anything but certain. Those 48 hours dragged by in a fog of dread. Harper and I were constantly on edge, flinching at every creak of the floor, every engine outside the window. The black SUV had not returned, but its absence was almost more disturbing than its presence. Were we still being watched, or had they moved on to more dangerous plans? The morning of our meeting with Clara Voss, I woke with my heart in my throat and a stomach in knots. I hadn't really slept at all. My body ached from tension. My mind refused to rest. Harper noticed the state I was in and wrapped me in a quick hug. "We can still back out," she said gently. "You don't owe anyone this, Rhea. No one would blame you." But I shook my head. I have to see it through. If I walk away now, I'll never stop looking over my shoulder. I can't live like that. We arrived at the cafe an hour early and chose a table with a clear view of the front entrance and the street beyond. I held a mug of coffee in my hands, but it remained untouched, more of a prop than a comfort. Every time the door opened, my heart skipped. At exactly 10 a.m., Clara walked in. She looked different than I remembered, more fragile, worn down. Her frame had thinned, and dark circles stood out beneath her eyes, barely hidden by makeup. She ordered a tea and approached our table with measured calm, as if pretending we were just old friends meeting to catch up. "It's good to see you," she said softly as she sat down. I introduced her to Harper, and for a few minutes we exchanged stiff, superficial pleasantries, all of us painfully aware of the real reason we were there. Then Clara reached into her handbag and pulled out a small black USB drive. She held it tightly between her fingers, not yet ready to let go. "Everything I could find is on here," she said in a low whisper. "Financial records, email chains, meeting logs. Rhea, it's worse than you think." I reached for it, but she hesitated. "Once I hand this over," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "there's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for what's on this?" I met her gaze. "I'm sure." She finally released the drive and sat back. Her voice picked up speed, the dam breaking. They're moving fast. Whatever this new phase is, it's coming soon. They're calling it Operation Exodus. I don't know everything, but I've seen the scale of what they're preparing. It's huge. International accounts, multiple shell companies, bulk transfers. They're planning to disappear with everything. "When?" Harper asked. Clara shook her head. "Could be days. A week at most. Vivian has been on edge making late-night calls, shredding papers, closing deals faster than usual. I felt a chill creep down my spine. This wasn't just money laundering. This was the endgame. "And Ethan?" I asked quietly, even though I dreaded the answer. Clara's expression softened with something like pity. Has at the center of it all, has the one coordinating everything. That last flicker of hope I'd been clinging to, that maybe he'd been manipulated, forced into this died right there at the table. He had chosen this life. Chosen lies. Chosen power over love. We stayed a little longer, Clara feeding us as much detail as she could. Just before we parted ways, she squeezed my hand tightly. "Please be careful, Rhea," she said, her voice trembling. "These people, if they find out I've helped you—" "They won't," I promised, though fear bubbled beneath my skin. "We'll protect you, I swear it." Back at Harper's apartment, we wasted no time. We huddled around her laptop, our breath shallow as we plugged in the USB, and there it was, proof. Dozens of folders, spreadsheets, PDFs, even audio recordings. Each file we opened peeled back another layer of the Blake family's empire fraud, bribery, embezzlement, and even blackmail. Politicians, judges, corporate executives, people I recognized from news segments and gala invitations. The reach of their operation was staggering, but so was the evidence Clara had gathered. This could take down half of Willow Ridge's elite, Harper whispered as we scrolled through a damning email thread marked urgent. I stared at the screen, a swirl of horror and vindication spinning inside me. This was it. We had the truth. Now we just had to survive long enough to expose it. We couldn't believe the scale of it. Politicians, business executives, even judges, all tied to the Blake family corrupt empire. As Harper and I scrolled through one damning email after another, the horror grew deeper. This could bring down half the city, Harper whispered, eyes wide. I nodded slowly, my mind reeling. We need to get this to the authorities. But who do we trust? She asked, her voice barely audible. That was the question that loomed over everything. If half the leadership in Willow Ridge was compromised, we couldn't just walk into a precinct and hand over the drive. So we kept digging, our eyes red and dry as the hours slipped by. We took notes, screen-captured documents, backed up files. We needed to understand the full extent of Operation Exodus. The more we read, the clearer it became. This was no longer just money laundering. The Blakes had built a network of shell corporations to funnel hundreds of millions through tax havens, offshore accounts, and false charities. It was a spiderweb of fraud that had taken years to weave, and it was about to culminate. Then we found the file that made my blood run cold. It was a dossier, my name, my photo, my personal records, social security number, bank account details I didn't even know existed. But what was inside wasn't just data, it was a plan. They were going to frame me for everything, set up dummy accounts in my name, forge financial trails that pointed directly at me. Once they vanished with the money, it'd be the fall girl. The headlines would call me the mastermind, and they'd disappear into luxury somewhere far from justice. My stomach churned. This is why they married me, I whispered, voice shaking. They needed someone to take the fall when it all collapsed. Harper immediately wrapped an arm around me. We're not going to let that happen. We've got them. We've got proof now. Before I could answer, a noise outside made us both freeze. A car door, then footsteps. We scrambled to the window. And there he was, Ethan, getting out of a black SUV like he had all the time in the world. How did he find us? Harper breathed, her face draining of color. I didn't know. Had Clara betrayed us? Had we been followed from the calf? Or had Ethan known where I was all along, simply waiting for the right moment? We have to get out of here, I said, already stuffing the USB drive and laptop into Harper's backpack. Now. We grabbed what we could, cash, clothes, the backup copies of our files, and moved toward the fire escape just as we heard footsteps on the stairs. The cool night air hit us as we climbed down the metal rungs, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. My hands slipped on the railing. We hit the ground just as we heard a loud crash from above. "Hessin!" Harper gasped. "Run!" We tore down the alley behind her building, Ethan's voice rising behind us in furious shouts. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but we didn't stop. I didn't know where we were going, just that we had to keep moving. Finally, after blocks of zigzagging through dark side streets, we ducked into a dingy 24-hour diner and collapsed into a booth at the back. We were drenched in sweat, barely able to catch our breath. But we were alive, and we still had the drive. "What now?" Harper asked, still gasping. I pulled a cheap prepaid phone from my pocket, the one we'd bought for emergencies. "This," I said, "now we get professional help." With shaking hands, I dialed the number I'd memorized days ago. A contact given to me by a journalist friend Ed once met during my university days. Someone who mentioned a detective not afraid to go after high places. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Detective Marcus Shaw. I took a deep breath. "Detective Shaw, my name is Rhea Navarro. I have information about a massive criminal operation involving the Blake family. My friend and I are in immediate danger. We need help." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Where are you?" I gave him the address. "Stay put. I'm on my way," he said. As I hung up, I felt the first flicker of hope in what felt like weeks. We had the evidence. We had a contact who might believe us. Maybe, just maybe, we had a fighting chance. But as I looked through the smeared window at the street beyond, empty and silent, I knew we weren't safe yet. The hardest part was still to come. The next hour was torture. Harper and I sat in silence, our eyes constantly scanning the entrance, flinching every time the bell over the door jingled. The few other customers were lost in their late-night meals, unaware of the storm that might walk through the door at any moment. When the door finally opened again, we both jumped. A tall man in his mid-50s stepped in, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, his leather jacket weathered. His sharp gaze swept the diner before landing on us. He walked over and sat down across from us without a word. "Rhea Navarro?" he asked. I nodded. "Detective Shaw?" He nodded back, his tone serious. "Let's talk." A man in his 50s stepped into the diner, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, the lines on his weathered face hinting at years in law enforcement. Even in plain clothes, he exuded authority. It clung to him like a second skin. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating, before they landed on us. "Rhea Navarro?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from us. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "I'm Detective Marcus Shaw," he said quietly. "You said you have information on the Blake family?" I gave a nervous glance around the diner before slowly pulling out the USB drive. "It's all here," I whispered. "Financial records, emails, internal plans, something they're calling Operation Exodus. It's huge, and it's happening soon." He took the drive with a measured nod, his expression shifting as the weight of the claim settled in. "Let's get you both to a secure location. My car's in the back. Move quickly and don't look back." The streets outside felt colder, more menacing than ever. As we stepped out, I scanned every shadow, every flicker of light. I didn't exhale until we were safely inside his unmarked vehicle, the doors locked behind us. "Where are we going?" Harper asked, still holding my arm tightly. "Precinct Safe House," Shaw replied, his eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. "You'll be safe there, and we can start going through what you've collected." The safe house turned out to be a quiet apartment tucked in a sleepy neighborhood on the outskirts of Willow Ridge nondescript, with no visible security, but layers of protection I could feel beneath the surface. A place built for hiding. Once inside, Detective Shaw wasted no time. He pulled out his laptop and loaded the USB. As each file opened, his expression grew darker. "This is remarkable," he muttered, almost to himself. "We've been trying to bring down the Blakes for years, but they've always been one step ahead. This might be the break we've needed." For the next few hours, I sat across from him and recounted everything from the subtle red flags in my marriage, to the violent night I fled, to the discovery of the plan to frame me. Harper filled in the rest, including the near escape from her apartment and the encounter with Ethan. By the time the first light of morning seeped through the blinds, Shaw leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "Here's what we do," he said. "I'll bring this evidence to my team and request a task force. In the meantime, you two are staying here, under protection." "For how long?" I asked, the thought of confinement tugging at my nerves. "As long as it takes," he said firmly. "These people won't hesitate to eliminate threats, and you two are at the top of that list." I nodded, my throat tight. The following days blurred together, a frustrating mixture of silence and tension. Harper and I did our best to stay busy, but the sense of waiting, of being hunted, was unbearable. Detective Shaw visited often, bringing updates, food, and reassurance. The investigation was progressing, a case was being built, but they needed more. And then, everything shifted. Shaw burst into the apartment one afternoon, his face grim. "We've got a problem." Harper and I stood frozen as he continued. "Someone tipped off the Blakes. They're liquidating assets, transferring money. We could lose them any day now." "What does that mean for us?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Shaw hesitated. "We need your help, Rhea." Harper's head snapped toward him. "What?" "No, absolutely not. They'll kill her." I stayed quiet, processing what I already knew in my gut. "I need to talk to him," I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness of my voice. Shaw explained the plan. I would reach out to Ethan, tell him I wanted to talk reconcile, wed meet in a public place. I'd be wired. His team would be nearby. If Ethan confessed, even hinted at Operation Exodus, they'd have everything they needed to bring down the entire family. It was dangerous, but it was also our only shot. The next day, I found myself sitting in a bustling cafe in downtown Willow Ridge, my heart threatening to punch through my chest. I had sent Ethan a message the night before. "I'm sorry. I just want to talk." He agreed. Too easily. Now I sat at a table near the window, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea, trying to appear calm. At 10:03 a.m., he walked in. Ethan Blake, perfectly dressed, calm, cold, charming as ever. Seeing him again ignited a confusing storm inside Minger, fear, and somewhere shamefully buried, the ghost of affection. He smiled as he sat down. "Rhea," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I've been worried about you." I forced a small smile, trying to channel the knave woman he'd once believed I was. "I've been scared. I needed time." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I understand." But I didn't. Not really. Because no matter how soft his words were, I could see it in his eyes. The calculation, the ice, the danger just beneath the surface. And now I had to make him talk. "I'm sorry I ran, Ethan," I said softly, trying to play the part. I was scared, confused. "Can we just talk?" For the briefest moment, I caught a flicker of the man I thought had married, the one who had once brought me tea when I was sick and kissed my forehead like it meant something. But just as quickly, the softness faded, replaced by a calculating stare that chilled me to the bone. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Why don't we go somewhere more private? I have a hotel room a block from here." I hesitated. That wasn't the plan. Detective Shaw's team had wired me for this cafe, not a hotel. But a quiet voice inside whispered that this might be the only way to get the last piece of the puzzle. The final proof. "Okay," I said, rising from my seat. In my ear, I could almost hear Shaw's muffled curse over the wire. We walked the short distance in tense silence, exchanging small talk that felt like sharp-edged glass. My hands were slick with sweat. My pulse thundered in my ears. As soon as we stepped into the hotel room, the shift in him was immediate. His face hardened. The charm evaporated. "Enough games, Rhea," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "Where's the drive?" My heart jumped. "What drive?" He stepped toward me, his eyes burning. "Don't play dumb." "I know Clara gave you something." "Where is it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, backing up until my spine met the wall. "Ethan, you're scaring me. Please, just tell me what's going on." He paused, studying me, as if trying to read the truth on my face. Then, to my shock, he laughed. It was cold, empty, and terrifying. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said, shaking his head. "You have no idea what you've stepped into." And then he started talking. Maybe he thought I was still too naive to understand. Or maybe he just wanted someone to hear it. But he laid it all out, the money laundering, the bribery, the blackmail. He confirmed everything Wed found and then some. "It wasn't personal," he said, almost casually. "When I married you, it was just a smart move. We needed someone clean, someone who wouldn't draw suspicion. You were perfect." Every word was like a knife through my chest. Still, I stayed calm. I had to. I thought of the wire beneath my shirt, of Shaw and his team listening just outside, waiting. "And what about Operation Exodus?" I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "What is it exactly?" His eyes snapped to mine. How do you know about that? My breath caught. Too late. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm in a vice grip. "You're wired," he growled. I tried to pull away, but he shoved me hard against the wall, his other hand clawing at my clothes, searching for the transmitter. "Ethan, stop! You're hurting me!" I gasped. But the man I'd once loved was gone. In his place stood a stranger, furious, unrecognizable, and lethal. His hand closed around my throat. I choked. Panic surged through me. This was it. This was how it ended. Then bang. The door burst open. Freeze. Detective Shaw and a team of officers stormed in, weapons raised. Ethan released me and stepped back, raising his hands slowly as an officer tackled him and forced him to the ground. His eyes met mine, wild with fury and disbelief. "You've ruined everything," he spat as they cuffed him and dragged him away. I slid down the wall, my legs too weak to hold me. It was over. Finally. Truly over. Shaw knelt beside me, his face softening. "Are you okay?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. My body trembled violently, tears spilling unchecked. "You did good, Rhea," he said gently. "You're safe now." And for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it. The days that followed were a whirlwind: police statements, legal briefings, press blackouts. My body was free from danger, but my mind was still trapped in the chaos of everything I'd lived through. The safe house became a strange kind of sanctuary, a place where I could finally start unpacking the trauma I'd been carrying for months. Harper never left my side. Despite everything, she remained my anchor, keeping me grounded when my thoughts spiraled into darkness, holding me when I broke down in the middle of the night, and reminding me again and again that I was not alone. I didn't know how I would have made it through without her. A week after Ethan's arrest, Detective Shaw visited us again. His face looked more worn than usual, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched with the weight of long nights and heavy truths, but there was a quiet glimmer of satisfaction behind the fatigue. "The DA is moving forward with the case," he said. "Your testimony, Rhea, along with the contents of that USB drive, it's enough to take down not just Ethan, but the entire Blake operation." I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt a wave of hollow anxiety rising in my chest. "What happens now?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Shaw's expression softened. "Now we keep you safe until trial. That could take months. And the Blakes, they still have allies, friends in high places. The thought of remaining in hiding for months longer made my heart sink. I'd already been living like a ghost-haunted, displaced, and always looking over my shoulder. But I nodded. I knew it was necessary. Before he left, Shaw paused at the door. "You did something incredibly brave, Rhea. Most wouldn't have had the courage to face what you did." His words lingered in my mind long after he was gone. Brave. I wasn't sure if that was the right word. Desperate, maybe. Angry, absolutely. But brave? I still wasn't sure. What I did know was that I couldn't live in limbo forever. The next morning, for the first time in what felt like ages, I woke with a purpose. I turned to Harper and said, "Help me make a plan." We spent the day brainstorming at her kitchen table, papers scattered everywhere, half-drunk coffee mugs beside our laptops. By nightfall, we had a rough outline for my future. Step 1. Untangle myself from the Blakes legally, financially, and emotionally. It meant paperwork, lawyers, staring directly at the life I had once thought was mine. With Harper's support and the help of an attorney Shaw recommended, I began the process of filing for divorce and separating myself from every shared account, property, and document tied to Ethan or his mother. It was messy, painful, but also necessary. As we tackled the legal side, I also began to look inward to the version of myself I had buried long before marrying Ethan. Before him, I had been working on my master's degree in environmental science. I'd pressed pause on my education to support his ambitions. It was a decision I now deeply regretted. So I emailed my old advisor, explaining, in vague terms, what had happened and asking if it was possible to re-enroll. To my surprise, she wrote back with kindness and enthusiasm. "We've missed you, Rhea," she said. "Let's talk." For the first time in months, I had something positive to look forward to. As the weeks passed, progress came in slow, steady waves. The case built momentum. I moved between safe houses. I testified in front of a grand jury, my voice trembling but unwavering as I described the web of lies, abuse, and crimes I'd been entangled in. I started seeing a therapist. It wasn't easy. Some days I cried so hard I couldn't speak. Other days I sat in silence, numb, staring at the wall. But slowly, session by session, I began to understand how deep Ethan's control had run, how expertly he and Vivian had manipulated me, isolated me, used me. 4 months after Ethan's arrest, Detective Shaw showed up with a smile that was rare on his face. "We got her," he said. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Vivian Blake. She was trying to flee the country. Caught her at the airport with a suitcase full of burner phones and foreign currency." I stared at him in disbelief. "So it's over?" He nodded. "It's over. We've got them all." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. For the first time since that awful night in the kitchen, I believed I was finally, truly free. That night, Harper and I ordered greasy takeout and popped open a bottle of cheap champagne. We laughed, we cried, we toasted to survival and new beginnings. As the case unfolded publicly, more horrifying details emerged. The Blake family's influence stretched through local government, corporate boardrooms, and charitable foundations. A twisted empire, held together by intimidation, bribery, and fear. And it had all begun to unravel because of one simple act. It canceled a cruise. That single moment of rebellion had set everything in motion, like the first domino in a long, ugly line. 6 months after Ethan's arrest, I stood outside the courthouse in a crisp blazer and sensible heels, my palms sweaty as I prepared to testify in open court. Beside me, Harper gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this," she whispered. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Inside the courtroom, I saw Ethan for the first time since that day in the hotel. He looked smaller. His tailored suit had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. That arrogant swagger, the one that once made him seem untouchable, was gone. For a moment, our eyes locked, and in them, I saw a storm of emotions, regret, bitterness, maybe even fear. Then he looked away, and I stepped forward. As I stepped onto the witness stand, something unexpected settled inside me. Strength, a quiet, steady kind. Not the kind that comes from being fearless, but the kind that comes from surviving fear, again and again. I looked across the courtroom, past the jury and attorneys, and let my gaze land briefly on Ethan. He was watching me, his once confident posture now slack, the orange of his prison uniform stark beneath the fluorescent lights. Our eyes met, just for a moment, and then he looked away. With that, I began. I told my story, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I spoke of the manipulation, the subtle ways Ethan and Vivian had eroded my sense of self. I shared how I had ignored the red flags, the slow unraveling of truth that shattered the illusion of love I once believed in. And as I spoke, I could feel the weight lifting, the last threads of fear and doubt slipping away. By the end of the trial, justice prevailed. Ethan, Vivian, their associates, each one was convicted on charges ranging from conspiracy and fraud to money laundering and attempted obstruction of justice. The courtroom held its breath as sentences were read aloud. Some gasped, others wept. And me? I felt a strange, quiet sadness mixed with the closure I never thought I'd get. A part of me, small but real, mourned the future I had once imagined, the home, the family, the promise of a life we'd never truly built. But I had long since learned, Mourning something that never existed is part of healing, too. Life slowly began to move forward. The media frenzy eventually died down. The investigators moved on to other cases. The police protection faded, and I was left with a decision I'd been putting off for months. Should I go home? My family back in Brazil had been begging me to return, to leave behind everything this country had taken from me, and come back to the warmth of familiarity. The idea was tempting, a fresh start, surrounded by people who had known and loved me long before I lost myself. But as I stood on the shoreline one evening, watching the sun melt into the waves of the Willow Ridge coast, I realized something profound. This pain-scarred city had become my home. Because this is where I found myself again. This is where I stood up when everything in me wanted to collapse, and I wasn't ready to walk away from that. I re-enrolled in my master's program, diving back into environmental science with a passion I hadn't felt in years. Harper and I found a small apartment near Campus Modest, warm and filled with laughter, a place that felt like mine, like us. We painted the walls ourselves, burned dinner more than once, made weekend traditions of movie marathons and late-night tacos. For the first time, I wasn't living for someone else's dreams, I was building my own. I began volunteering at a local women's shelter, offering support to those who, like me, once didn't know how to leave. I shared my story when I could, held trembling hands, reminded them of their worth when they couldn't see it themselves. It wasn't easy. There were days the past clawed its way back uninvited. But healing, it learned, isn't linear, and I wasn't doing it alone. 1 year after the trial, I walked across a graduation stage. My cap and gown fluttered in the wind as I reached for the diploma I had once believed I'd never earn. From the stage, I spotted Harper in the crowd, cheering like she was at a rock concert, and beside her my parents and my little sister, who had flown in from Brazil, tears in their eyes and pride on their faces. My chest swelled with something deeper than joy, gratitude. That evening, we celebrated with a beachside barbecue. The sky was streaked in oranges and purples. Music played softly behind us. The air was thick with the smell of grilled food and ocean salt. At one point, I wandered down to the shoreline, barefoot, toes in the surf, just to feel the water kiss my skin. I thought of the girl I had been not long ago, curled on a cold tile floor, lost and terrified, believing her life was over. And I thought of the woman I had become. Scarred, yes, but stronger, wiser, free. Somewhere out there, Ethan Blake sat behind bars, living with the consequences of his choices. I didn't feel hatred anymore. I didn't feel longing. What I felt, oddly enough, was pity. He had chosen power over love, greed over humanity, and in the end he lost everything. But me, I chose truth. I chose courage. I chose me. As I walked back to the laughter of my family and friends, the breeze carrying their joy to my ears, I felt a peace I'd never known before. The road ahead was still uncertain. Life doesn't promise clarity. But whatever came next, I was no longer afraid, because I had already walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. My life had been shaped by heartbreak, but it would no longer be defined by it. And that freedom, that was the most precious thing in the world.